So thank you for joining me. It's the last session of the day. You're troopers to be here the whole day, and I hear this is a bad spot to be in because the only thing holding you from drinks and entertainment is this session. I hope that won't cause a stampede right now. In terms of a quick introduction, my name is Jack Kabat. I'm a program manager lead at Microsoft, and my focus is the data loss prevention area in Exchange and Office products. It's very exciting to be here to talk to you about this. It's only recently we've released this new capability and we've been working on it for quite some time. Before I get started, I'm just curious, how many of you are familiar with data loss prevention, heard of the term, kind of know what it is? All right, that's great. That's most of you. And how many of you are familiar from actually having played with products, either something you've deployed or something you trialed? Awesome. That helps a lot. So I'll spend the next hour or so talking about our capabilities that we've added to 2013 in both Exchange and Outlook specifically, and look at some of the innovative ways in terms of how we're looking at data loss prevention from our feature set. If you have any questions, please feel free to come up in the middle of the session. I'd love to have this be more interactive and get feedback from you as we're going through it. All right, so to start off, here are a couple headlines, and this is not a scare tactic, but just to put things in a little bit of a context perspective. The first one is large retailer leaks payment information via email. Accidental email with attachment exposed hundreds of individual names and social security numbers. The interesting things about these headlines and the corporations behind them is that these were accidental leakage of information. These weren't malicious attempts at reveal this information, but this was really user error. Users who were either attached the wrong content to documents that were leaked or potentially sent it to the wrong person, a wrong alias, external versus internal. And this is an interesting point because a lot of our focus of how we looked at data loss prevention was to focus at the accidental leakage of information versus really trying to go after the malicious user. Obviously, our capabilities will also catch the paths of malicious users, but fundamentally, our approach has been a little bit different. When we really look at the end user as somebody who we want to educate and bring into the fold of what it means to realize what is sensitive data in the organization and how they should be protecting the organization and from its leakage. So, in our view of data loss prevention, there's really the best way to summarize it helps to identify, monitor, and protect sensitive data through deep content analysis. And the three key words, identify, monitor, and protect, kind of are the fundamental pillars of how we structured our solution. The identification is really around providing a new classification engine that we've integrated into various Office products that will provide ability to scan for sensitive data. And the question comes up, well, what is actually sensitive data? It's actually very different in different organizations. And it's driven by regulations. It could be PII information, social security numbers. It could be financial data in organizations that are ruled by things like PCI DSS, credit cards, etc. But it could also be something much more specific to your organization, like employee IDs or even health account numbers. Those aren't global, but they're still very much information that in different jurisdictions needs to be protected. So our approach is to provide identification through deep content analysis in our classification engine, where you get to scan for sensitive content, and then provide a set of rules and policies to how you want to deal with the risk that this sensitive content represents to your organization. The other part of identification in our approach is we want the end users to also learn to identify content that's sensitive on their own and really change their behavior by educating them as part of the compliance solutions that we're deploying. So end user education is a key aspect of how we see the value proposition of what we provide. Next thing is monitor. Monitor really comes in two aspects. One is around providing deep audit information that can be provided on yearly reviews to prove that both you have processes and tools in place to monitor for sensitive data leakage within your organization. The other part of monitoring is being able to provide a set of tools that you get to really analyze what kind of data you have flowing in your organization And what business impact would it be for you to actually deploy a set of DLP policies or a set of DLP controls on the average user and the business flows within the organization? And that's, again, the key thing we're trying to do is provide you with the tools that as you increase compliance and provide higher security in your organization, at the same time you're doing this without disrupting normal business processes and impacting end users as least as possible, and then bringing them into the fold through our end user education. And finally, protection. Protection is really, you can look at it as a as an array of different options, because protection really depends on both the environment or the context of your interaction. If you're trying to protect communication with an external partner, you're going to use one level of protection. You may use something like exchange-hosted encryption. If you're doing internal protection, you may use something like IRM, which is well suited for within your organization. You may also have different protections for different risk levels you associate with the content you have in the organization. So let's think of being able to disclose 5 credit cards to an internal between departments represents a very different risk and likely a very different required protection than sending 100 credit cards outside of your organization where you're going to want to apply a very different set of protections. So our approach is to allow you to really tailor the solution to match what risk level you associate with sensitive data that lives in your organization, and then provide the right level of protections for them. All right, so I think the best way to introduce this is to really give you a quick demo of our solution to see it at work. Yeah, am I right? No.
We had it. Okay, can you go to see what the resolution is? Let's see. Can you see what the resolution is? 19?
20 by 1080.
Yeah, that's what it should be.
Hold on 1 second. There we go. All right, sorry about that. All right, so what I have here is, I'm going to pretend I'm Sarah Davis. It's a little bit of a stretch, but let's assume I'm Sarah. And I'm working, I'm working in finance within my organization. My organization is Contoso Exports, and it happens to be hosted in Office 365, but the functionality I'm going to show you today would be just as well available within an on-prem installation, and also be just as available if I had a hybrid configuration where part of my organization was on-prem, part of it was in the cloud. As part of my work, Sarah is going to communicate with Tony. As part of the communications with Tony, she's going to provide him a set of accounts that he needs to process for chargebacks. All right, so as you can see, as part of me performing normal operations within Outlook, what's actually occurred is we've integrated our classification engine right within Outlook itself. And what it does is it performs scanning of both the content and the attachments on a regular basis, and applying the definitions and looking for sensitive content that you have defined as important within your organization, and applying a set of policies to that. So in this case, we see a very simple thing that we have a policy tip that's a new notification making the user aware that the content, there's sensitive content in the email, and the user should be careful on their operation. They can hover over the policy tip where they will see details of what was discovered. We found credit card information. They can report this as false positive. For credit cards, that's not really such a big deal because credit cards are such well-formed entities with such good detections that that's not likely going to be a case. But for employee IDs, that's probably much more likely. I know in our testing internally at Microsoft, we discovered that our bug numbers seem to match what European debit cards were. And we use that capability to both report false positive and also tune our system. You can also add a learn more link that points to information about the compliance policies within the organization. So at this point, Sarah has realized she hasn't attached all the content she needed, so she's going to add an additional file. Here are the files for processing. And as she's doing this, you can see that we're continuously evaluating the content. And what happened is we found additional content that has pushed the threshold above of what our previous policy was. In this policy, Sarah is actually prevented from sending the message until she actually does something different. If you read the message is worded much more strongly, saying that Tony is not authorized and can't receive this email. However, Sarah also has an option to override this. And this is a key aspect of our solution to really bring in the end users into the fold. And in many times, they are the business owners and they are the content owners, and they can make decisions around how to treat this content. Obviously, IT is still very much in control because you decide what are the thresholds, what are the risk levels that need to be crossed for the various policies to take effect to allow Sarah overrides. Is it that we have 5 credit cards? Is it that we have 10 credit cards? Is it credit cards at all? Maybe it's only employee IDs that need to be overridden and credit cards can't be sent at all. All of those capabilities are configured, pushed down to the client for evaluation with the in-context experience. All right, so Sarah can override this message, and in this case, she's asked to provide a business justification. This is, again, another step for Sarah to feel like, sure, do I really want to do this? Do I really have a business need for me to be able to perform this? At the same time, we want to make sure we don't stop her from productivity. We enable her to continue her business processes if that is what is really required. So we're going to override this. And now that goes away, and Sarah can send this off to Tony. All right, so let's continue our demo. And Sarah is also going to send the same email, but there's another Tony internally in the organization who she's going to just confirm that she's going to send him the same files and basically confirm with him that this is being processed. These are the files with the vendor. As you can see here, I've added exactly the same files, yet I'm actually not getting an override. I'm getting a very different experience. And that's another part of our capabilities where the context is not just what we have discovered, but who are you actually operating within. So in here, we're providing a different policy for what's happening for content that's being sent outside of my organization versus content that's being sent within my organization. And in this case, all we're saying is just have a warning, an educational message, again, about credit cards, alerting Sarah that there is sensitive content here, but not preventing her, because the risk of sending this internally is very different from our aspect as the IT and compliance officers. Anyway, so that's kind of the cracks, the real integration of our capabilities right within Outlook to provide an in-context evaluation, user education, and empowerment in terms of their policies. So what do you guys think? Or come on, you can do better than that. Awesome. Sure? So we don't have automatic S/MIME encryption, at least on the client end. We can, on the back end, configure other encryption mechanisms. We can do IRM, we can do exchange-hosted encryption, and potentially other mechanisms. S/MIME we don't force on this today from a policy perspective. All right, so this was Sarah working within Outlook. But Sarah is also a mobile user, and she performs other applications, other functions, out of other clients. In this case, we're going to use OA as an example, but it really could be any mobile client or anything else. So in this example, we're also going to go in and really write the same message to Tony, attach the same files, and send this off. And as you notice, obviously there was no rich client experience in OA, as we don't have the classification engine embedded within the OA experience. However, if you notice, we did see something happen, and what happened was Sarah got an NDR. So what's actually happening is we're doing the same policy evaluations on the back end in Exchange Server as we are on the client. And in this case, we provided an NDR, but if you look at the NDR, there's actually an option for Sarah to still override this. Even though it's a lower fidelity experience, she's still not actually blocked from doing this. So if you look at the NDR, which is a fully customizable message, she can provide an override for the policy. So we're going to do exactly that. Send this off, and hopefully there won't be an NDR. We can delete this one. And again, Sarah is able to continue her work, providing within clients that provide a very different experience, yet at the same time providing a consistent policy evaluation both in the clients and on the back server. Now, so that's kind of it for Sarah, but as you've been seeing, there's been various pop-ups occurring throughout this, and I wanted to quickly go over that. So in my Outlook, I actually have two mailboxes set up. I have one for Sarah Davis, who I've been pretending to be. I also have one for what's called incident management. And what you see is this is a mailbox that has real-time notifications of detections being sent. I'm just going to make this a little larger for folks to see. All right, and so you can configure incident management mailbox, which will generate incident mails. This is very similar to, in at least concept, to what journal mails are, where every time an incident occurs in real time, an email will be sent to this mailbox for examination. In here, we can see there's information about the mail itself, who the sender was, etc. Then we have basic audit information. Here we see severity is high. Override, yes, it did occur. We did override this through the message subject. And false positives have not been recorded. Further, we look at, there are data classifications that have been found. We found a credit card, actually 29 of those. There's a confidence 85, and we can gloss over for that right now, with a minimum confidence of 85. Next, we see there's a bunch of rules that have been hit. And we see that those rules, some of them belong to Australian financial data policy, and some of them belong to PCI data security. We can see also that those rules performed various actions. One of them was just setting a header, actually, right here. Another one was setting an audit severity level, sender notify. And another one here was the one that caused actually the generating of incident reports. Looking further, we see the next thing, we see exactly what we matched. We matched the credit card, and here's the value of the credit card that was matched. To help us actually recognize this, we see that there's a context within the document of what that credit card was around. And you can see that there's some text around. Here's the list of card processings, and then the actual Visa account numbers that have been within the documents. So incident management mails are really serve two purposes. One of them is to allow real-time notifications, and you can integrate those with third-party systems like incident reporting systems to kick off richer workflows. It's basically, you can set up an SMTP endpoint, the mail will get there for processing by the external system, and you can define richer workflows. The second thing that's very useful is for using this as part of tuning. A lot of times, especially when you look into custom DLP entities, things like employee IDs, things like healthcare numbers, those are less identifiable than things like credit card numbers or social security numbers. And because they're custom, you're going to need to go through a phase of tuning to make sure your false positive rates are what you expect and what your users can tolerate. That's kind of another usage of our generated incident reports. Any questions on this? Or the client scenarios? Okay. All right, so just a quick recap in terms of user education. We're really focused on empowering users to manage their compliance. There's a contextual policy evaluation right within the application that the user is familiar with and can do something about. And it's to educate them about what is the sensitive content and what is the operation that's contextually being performed that violates the operation. The idea is not to disrupt the user end flow, but to actually leverage the user as somebody who communicates as part of the actual compliance process. All right, so next thing I'm going to do, so there's a question in the back. Could you come up to the mic?
I assume that user notification is not required, that it's possible to do rules where, we just stop and...
Correct.
Right?
So end user notification is not required. It's very much a configurable option that you can decide, and you can decide for specific thresholds or specific types that user notification will apply, versus for others it will not. And for the second demo I have, I'll step much more in detail in terms of the kind of policies you can create and the flexibility you have in terms of configuring this. But a good question. All right, so the next thing is a quick kind of walk through the system of the various components that make up the solution. In here, I don't want to call this architecture because it's somewhat high level, but it will demonstrate some of the options and some of the components involved. So we start off with the admin, who will perform policy configuration. And policy configuration can be based on things we have provided in the product, built-in capabilities, or it can be things that aren't provided in the product because our policies and our content are fully extensible. So on TechEd, there's a schema definition of how do you actually author DLP content, and you can create your own sensitive information and DLP policies that our system will consume and then interact with the same way it does for the built-in content. Once this is uploaded into the server, it's actually distributed forest-wide, and it's also made available to Outlook clients, which means there's a single point of configuration for policies that apply to both clients and servers. Now, as the gentleman asked before, obviously if there is no client-based policies, there's nothing to distribute to the clients for their processing. So now that the client policies have been distributed, contextual policy evaluation will occur as part of processing. And that's really kind of the first demo that we saw, was as Sarah was communicating with various users, the client was interpreting the policies and performing various user actions based on what the policy definitions was. But also, as we saw in the demo, once the email is sent, we will also evaluate the same set of policies on the back end. Obviously, things like client notifications are not enforced on the back end, but things like requirements for overrides, blocking, and other things are very much performed on the server to provide a consistent policy. This is where, for example, encryption could occur. So if you wanted to have encryption being performed on the server, that's very much the various options, and the two things that are available out of the box are either doing IRM protection, you can obviously do TLS protection with partners, and you can also do exchange hosted encryption, which allows you, which would require the usage of our service. Further processing on the back end is also where we store the audit data and perform the incident data generation and any other actions you have defined that the server can perform. Any questions on this before I move on? Great. All right, so we've talked a little bit about policy enforcement, and one of the interesting things around policy enforcement is it's really making you in control in terms of what kind of enforcements do you want to have, which is really boils down to what risk do you see associated with the sensitive content that's being detected and within the operation of that that's taking place. So as you saw before, we had a very different policy application and control where that was being performed internally versus if it was being sent externally. And the controls really kind of go from, it's a spectrum where we start off on one side with alerts or notifications or just pure audit and really move to things like encryption, where we begin to interact more with the users and actually inject things into the business process, appending disclaimers, requiring users to do overrides, requiring reviews where you actually put the message into a review pool where somebody has to actually release it from a review before the message can flow out. And finally, to really kind of hard controls such as redirections, blocking, and preventing the communication to take place. The key takeaway is that you're in full control of defining what is the right control based on the risk level you associate with those policies. So this is looking a little bit deeper, specifically on the Exchange server in terms of how we apply and evaluate policy. So one of the key things that we're leveraging is we've built in our DLP capabilities right into transport rules. How many of you guys are familiar with transport rules on the Exchange side? Great. So you're familiar with the fact that now we have about 50 different predicates, or what we would call conditions, and 20 plus different actions you can define in a single set of rules. Well, the DLP capabilities build right into that, where you can start using any of the other predicates or conditions together with a new one called message contains sensitive information, and then you say what kind of information you're looking for. Is it credit cards? Is it social security numbers? Is it employee IDs? And you also can get to leverage all the available actions that are available as part of transport rules as well. The basic processing is, as we receive messages on the back end, the transport rule agent is invoked as part of categorizer, and we will perform text extraction as the first step. Text extraction basically takes something like a PDF document, strips away all the content that's not text in the data, but really the metadata, and then and the formatting and the presentation layer, and then actually pushes that into our classification engine. Our classification engine then processes the raw text and applies the heuristics of what it means to find the sensitive data that you have defined. We've also optimized this so that if you have a more complicated set of rules that have multiple conditions, we will perform the rules that are least costly first, and only if we satisfy those will we do text extraction and classification, since those are heavier operations. So if I had a rule, very simple rule that said, if message is sent externally and contains sensitive data, we would first evaluate the directionality of the message, and if it's externally bound, if that was true, then we would move on to the next predicate, which would be the one that does text extraction and classification. Otherwise, we would not even get there. Any questions on this? Go ahead. Sure.
The transport rule, when we're scanning for a document, I guess it's the removal of the metadata that's causing us issues. So an attachment has metadata that's user configurable, tags and titles and things like that, and that's heavily used in our company by the legal department and things to mark things to be caught for DLP. And we found that so far with Exchange 2010 and 2007 and Office 365, it's not detecting the metadata that is that tag or that title. Is that something that is by design or going to be corrected, or?
So in our 2013, we've expanded our set of content types that we crack out of the box. Before in 2010, this was really based on iFilters. We've actually switched to another technology that we use that has a broader set, so things like PDFs and things are automatically supported for extraction. The specific point around metadata is something that we've heard before and have been prioritizing in terms of when such capability will come in, but today we don't scan for metadata either. The way we'd actually see that coming in would be not necessarily as part of the DLP capabilities, but just another type of predicate within transport rules that would specifically look for metadata. So that's something that we're investigating, but right now it's not available in 2013. No. No ETA at this point. All right, so moving along, we're going to kind of start looking at how is this actually presented from a management aspect? What kind of paradigms have we provided to make the usability of this from an administrator perspective be possible in a seamless and easy-to-use fashion? The first aspect of that is around DLP policy templates. What templates are, well, it's kind of like little blueprints. They really describe of what should the policy look like if it's instantiated in the environment. By itself, the policy template is not actually something that interacts with the environment. It's really just purely a blueprint. And what we've done is we've looked at various regulations around the world and have created these starting policy templates for global content around the world. So we have things, and I'll have a more detailed slide on this in a little bit, but we focus on North America, Europe, Japan, and a number of other countries, specifically looking for what content can be well defined from a DLP perspective, is easily or globally identifiable, and what regulation does it map to. Based on the regulations, we've created these DLP policy templates, and they're either specific to regulations or specific to data types, such as PII information or financial data or health data. And that is something that ships built in the product. And that's, again, a little bit of a change of what we've done in the past, where we're not providing you just a set of tools. We're providing you some pre-configurations for you to get started in terms of detecting. Because what we learned from a lot of our customers was that a challenging point to understanding of what is DLP was, or deploying DLP, was specifically, well, what is a credit card number? How do I find a good definition of what that is? And what should I do from the beginning when I find one? So we've created these templates to provide that capability. This is also fully extensible, where you can bring your own templates from either your own organization, or from different ISVs who can build these templates and distribute and work with you to capture the things that aren't provided out of the box. Behind the templates, and once you instantiate them and create them in your organization, is what's called DLP policy rules. And these are really transport rules specific and tied to policies. So there's this construct of a policy, and you can think of it as a management object that tracks the rules that are part of it and allow you consistent, easy management of the rules that are part of a policy. So this is built on transport rules, and those of you who understand transport rules know that it's really based on a set of conditions, and you can have 1 through n conditions, and there's 50 different predicates of what those conditions can look like. You can have a set of actions that will say, am I going to reject the message? One of the new actions, am I going to notify the sender, which is what we saw in Outlook? Am I going to generate an incident report? Am I going to be able to set a severity level for us to deal with from a reporting backend perspective? And finally, there's a set of exceptions. And those are very handy to, especially when you start looking at policies that are much richer, where you want to provide different set of policies across different user organizations. But let's say you want to, exclude the VPs from having to comply with some of these policies. So that's the basic structure of what DLP policy rules, which is really modeled on transport rules, and how the capabilities that we've been seeing today and the things you can build on your own are based on. The next thing is around sensitive content detections. And this is again where we looked at and did a study across the world of looking of what are the entities, the specific types that are well suited for being able to be identified on a global basis, and have then researched them and provided built-in capabilities within the product to match those. So when you install the product, you will already have almost 50 entities from around the globe for you to get started with in terms of defining of what is a Japan driver's license number or EU debit card number. Those things come pre-existing within the solution, so you don't have to build these ahead of time. And in terms of the entities themselves, these aren't just pure regexes. Depending on the entities and the kind of validations they have, the things we have built in the box can include things like regular expressions, checksum validations, and in addition to that, collaborative evidence, things that provide our higher confidence that we have found what we're actually looking for. And these as well, just like policy templates, are things that are fully extensible. So while we have the ones we have discovered and found, clearly there's a world of content out there that we can't produce on a global basis. Think of things like, again, employee IDs, health card numbers, etc., which are things that are much more unique to either a geography or an organization that need to be done within that context and created. Again, those can be imported into the system and from then on used in the same fashion as the ones that are pre-built. So just quickly looking at kind of a sample of our content analysis process of how we actually validate, in this case, that we found a credit card. And this is based on what's configured out of the box, and you have various triggers where you can make that be more or less, you can increase the detection level or lower it depending on what your goals are and what kind of data you're seeing within your organization. So tuning of even the out-of-box content is very much supported. So here, the first thing, if we look at kind of this side, we'll see that we have content is just a name, a visa number, and expiry. We'll start off by looking for a regex, and if, in this case, a 16-digit number, we'll detect the number in the content. The next thing do is, because we believe this is a credit card, we'll do a checksum analysis on that to make sure it matches the checksum. We match checksum, we continue, otherwise we skip and move on. The next thing is we have configured additional evidence in terms of we want specific keywords. We're looking for a name and a date within the proximity of the regex we have just found. If we find these, we select a verdict of the sensitive content has been found, and we see if there's more of that content within the document. And there's two simple examples up here. One of them, if you look at the subjects, one of them will match the credit cards, one of them will not match the credit card. And it's interesting because as we've been working out within even our own field, as part of their demos, they've typed in random 16-digit numbers, and we're disappointed this is not matching. But this is exactly what you want, because the success of your DLP deployment, in a lot of ways, falls onto having good detections of what is of low false positive rates, and by enabling and seeing the additional regexes, the functional analysis, and additional evidences, this is where you can really bring your analysis higher to be sure of what you've detected. Any questions on this before I continue? I'm sorry? A map? So can we detect maps was the question. And are you talking more about image analysis? So that's not something that we have capabilities for today, although some of our algorithms for transforming from the content to text extraction uses eye filters, and there is various OCR technologies, but that wouldn't be maps. That would be more of looking for digits in images, for example. It's not something that we have built in, but there is such capabilities available in the product. For maps, the closest we would come is being able to detect images per se, but not what kind of images those are. It would be interesting to see, adding eye filters that would potentially look for things like you describe, if that's a capability that would actually meet your requirements. All right, so I'm going to switch to another demo. All right, so we don't need Sarah anymore. All right, so this is going to start looking at data loss prevention from more of an administrative side of what we have available. So our DLP capabilities are integrated within Exchange Administration Center. And if you go to compliance management, data loss prevention, this will be kind of your dashboard of the DLP capabilities rolled out in your organization. This is looking at the same set of policies that we used in our first part of the demo, and this is a live tenant, again, in Office 365. This is our Contoso exports, and I'm actually logged in as Sarah Davis, who happens to be the administrator. So from the first view here, you can see that there's actually 3 policies that are currently in effect, and they have different modes, and we'll talk about those in a minute. There's a PCI credit card, Australian financial data, and PCI data security, or PCI DSS. The next thing you'll notice is we're using live tiles in this view where we're actually seeing that we have 14 matches of Australian financial data and 16 of PCI DSS with 7 overrides and 1 false positive here. And this is showing you a quick view over the last 24 hours, high-level view of how these policies are performing and what kind of detections and things are happening. If you want to actually start deploying things, you would go in here and start creating policies. And there's really 3 ways to create them. You can create them from templates, and that's kind of the built-in templates that we have available. You can create a custom DLP policy, and that creates really an empty policy where you then will author the rules directly. You can import DLP policies, and what this does, it creates one from an ISV or one you created yourself, and the policy is really an XML document that you get to point to here and upload it and create it. But the most interesting one, and the one I want to spend a bit of time on, is creating it from templates. That's kind of really what you saw before, where you get to provide a name and description, and really then you choose what template most closely looks and has the kind of data that you're concerned about. And as you can see, we have over 30 different templates looking at regulations and things across the world. And again, this is existing on every one of our Office 365 clients that have DLP are on-prem. This comes pre-configured. You would select one of these, like US Patriot Act, and the next thing is you get to select is, am I going to create these in which of the modes? And this is an interesting concept because as we thought of this, we want to provide a deployment model that really resonates with how we see people using DLP and deploying that in organizations. So the first thing you would do is you would do a deployment in test DLP policy without policy tips. What that means is we're going to create the policy. The policy may have rules that will encrypt or block messages. We're not going to do any of that. We're just going to continue auditing what we found and what we would have done if the rules were in effect. And that's what our recommendation is for your deployment, is to first deploy in that fashion, use our reporting tools to figure out what content is flowing through the organization, and only after that begin focusing and ratcheting up your enforcement of policies. The next thing you would do in that kind of a deployment is you would enable the customer notifications or the end user notifications. And this is, again, you won't make anybody override things or even encrypt things on the back end, but you're going to start educating users of, look, you're sending sensitive data, and get them accustomed to the fact that new things are coming that they will potentially need to adjust to. And finally, we will enforce, which means the full capabilities of the rules will become in play. So if you have encryption rules, they will start encrypting. If you have rules for blocking content, they will start blocking. If you have things for BCCing or doing any of these other operations, those will all become effective. And that's just another way of how we looked at how can we make the administration of this feature be easy and really help you map it to what we believe is a successful deployment within the organization. So let's quickly leave this here and look at one of the policies I created earlier. And this is the one that's really been doing all the work. This is in enforce mode. And if you look at the policy, it's made up of several rules. And I'll dive into some of these to walk you kind of what the rules mean. And if you can, as you see, the way the mode works is if I change the mode on the policy itself, each of the rules will actually inherit the same mode. So they'll be all in enforce mode or in test mode, etc. So let's start off with there's two rules for outside the organization. One is called low count. And let's see what that rule looks like. So again, this is pretty similar to a standard transport rule where you give it a name. And in this one, we look for outside the organization. We could easily look for a partner or inside the organization. And the next thing here is message contains sensitive information. And this is really the predicate that hooks back into our classification engine for detections. So if I click on this, we will see here we're looking for credit card. We're looking for a minimum of 1 and maximum of 4. And that will make more sense in a second. But we can also add other kinds of classifications, where here we have our 40-plus numbers or entities we can add to our rules. And just by adding this up, I will now start looking for the France passport number as part of this classification. So you can see there's a lot of control here in terms of defining not just what I'm looking for, but also what is the range of risk associated with this. And because I'm only looking for 1 to 4, my rule will just have a pure notify sender. So this is an action on the rule itself, which will notify which will translate to the Outlook operation of notifying the sender. I can click on this, and you can see there's actually multiple ways to interact with the client. So this notion of notify sender is a new action that we've added to transport rules to allow this new capability. And there's really the flavors of things you can do. You can notify them, but really just, and that's it. You can block the message and not allow them to send it. You can block the message, but allow them to report it as false positive. You can block the message, allow them to override it, or you can override it and actually provide justification, which is what I use in the demo. A lot of little differences and providing you with full flexibility in terms of how you want to manifest those things to your end users. So we're going to leave that as is. And the next thing you can see in the rule is we set a severity level of low in terms of how we're going to audit this. The rule is in enforce mode, and that's really it from what this rule performs. So now we're going to contrast this with the high count rule. And this is very similar, where I'm also looking for things going outside the organization, things going for credit card, but if I click on this, you can see I'm looking from 5 to anything higher. And this is where I'm able to provide that various experience simply by tweaking a policy configuration of what kind of sensitive content I'm looking for. Next is here we're blocking the message but allowing them to override it. And this is where we provided our message that was used by Sarah to figure out that she can provide an override as part of her message processing. And here we also generated an incident mail, which is the next action. So here we have 2 actions as part of this rule. And incident mailbox is just the recipient. And you can see you have full control of what kind of data is represented in the GIR messages. And this is to allow you to have potentially multiple levels of people who will analyze the content, and you get to decide what PII or what sensitive information they want to see. All right, so to finish this off, we'll look at one more rule, which is allow override. And this was the rule that kicked in when Sarah was trying to send things from OAuth that didn't actually have the rich experience. And this is very simple, where all we did was we looked for a subject that included override, and if that was set, we set this special header that would basically dictate the rules further in the stack that an override was occurring and an override operation was performed. These headers are protected headers that are used only within the organization to help provide this capability. And these headers will automatically be set when somebody's using this from Outlook. And here we triggered this by an override. Clearly, if including something in subject is not appropriate for your end users, you can do anything else or have other means of having your users communicate the fact that they want to override the message, and your action would still be the same. While we're here, I'm just going to quickly give you a quick tour of some of the options available and the richness of the conditions you can express in terms of policies. It's very easy to start building policies where you have different things for your HR department than finance, than sales. That's intended because in many ways, you will want to provide them with more flexibility, and that's fully up to you to decide. So there's a lot of things about the sender, looking if it's internal, external, is a member of a group, does the address include regex or specific words, is this person, the next two are interesting around has specific properties. This is actually looking up the user's object in Active Directory and seeing do they have specific properties set. Depending on your directory setup, this may be a good way to determine things like departments or cost centers to differentiate users and apply specific policies to users from specific cost centers or departments. And there's even IP address level settings. Recipient has a very similar set of predicates available to them in terms of what you want to be able to match. They will look at subject and body, where, again, you get to look for regexes or keywords. Next things around attachments, very similar. Here, this is pure regex, and this is not actually DLP yet. And these are things that have been available for the past, where you get to look for attachments containing specific words and file names, or potentially just pure regexes in the attachments. Finally, here we get content-sensitive information, and this is the predicate that will kick off full analysis of the content within our classification engine. And we even have predicates that will look at relationships. If the sender and recipient are managers, for example, one is the manager of the other, or members of a specific group, those are again things that you can use to provide much more fine-grained controlled policies within your organization. And in terms of actions, if we look at actions, you can forward the message, redirect it, block the message, you can add recipients, apply disclaimers, set message properties, secure it with rights protection, TLS encryption. You can also do EHA if you're using our service. You can prepend the message, notify sender, which is really the one that interacts with the client, or generate incident reports. So any specific questions around the kind of policies you can do? All right. So the last thing here is show you is, before we go there, is the fact that the policy tips that we show to the clients are fully configurable. And those things, again, the messages that the clients would see are things that you can decide of what messages you're going to provide to them. And further, you can actually provide them in different languages. So for different locales, you can set unique messages. This is going to end users. So obviously, you want to be, again, providing things in the context of the language the user is interacting with. All right, so the next thing to quickly look at is around our reporting capabilities. Here we go. All right, so if you go to the reporting center, there's a number of reports around mail flow, protection, which is more around anti-spam, etc. Rules is where we look about transport rules, and there's a number of reports built in around DLP. So the DLP is really ability to see hits based on policies or based on specific rules for other incoming or outgoing messages. So I don't have much content in here that's hit the reports. As you can see, I was playing with the demo just a few days ago. And what we see here is that for all the policies, we have up to 30 hits on 6.3, with the top matches for these two specific policies, Australia financial data and PCI DSS. We also have 7 overrides, and it looks like we have 1 false positive. And then you can filter, obviously, by specific policies. There's no overrides here, just hits, and credit cards, which would be right here, that would have one of the overrides. So that's kind of example of the built-in reports, and what we think of these as really summary reports that exist in the product. Beyond summary reports, we actually offer also detailed message reports. And how that's done is actually through Excel, where if I go back to this page, I can actually download a Mail Protection Reports Excel. Once I download this can actually pull data from the service and look at very detailed analysis of content. So this is, and if you can see here, there's traffic, spam, malware. The ones of interest are around data loss prevention. Not much of trends because I haven't populated much data, but you can see kind of the first line here where we're seeing the various counts, and you can start filtering by false positive, matches, different policies, etc. When it gets interesting is I can actually drill all the way to see what were the messages that were sent by whom. I don't have the message content. I just have all the stuff that would normally be included in message tracking logs, but specific to policies. And it's in Excel where I can start really data mining this. This becomes very important when you're first deploying this for you to really start seeing what kind of content is hit within the organization and how is that content being interacted by end users. Any questions on the reporting stuff? So the reporting lives in Office 365. If you're an on-premise customer, you can actually have some of the filtering capabilities be done through the service, even though your mail lives on-prem. We also have a number of our partners who have built reporting capabilities for on-prem as well. Does DLP require any, I'm sorry, what? So it's licensed, so it is licensed as part of the enterprise suite. So depending where you fall in the licensing, you would either have capabilities for it, or it just depends where you're licensed. It's not licensed by itself. It's basically part of the enterprise suite. All right, so the last thing I want to do here before moving on is we've talked a lot about classifications and custom content. I want to just give you a quick view, and I'm not going to go through all of this, of this is what a definition looks like for sensitive content. Here I've just mocked up a very simple modification to what our rule looks like for Social Security number. And things are distributed in what's called a rule pack. And there's just some metadata information about the rule pack up top, but finally we get to U.S. Social Security number. It has an identifier, recommended confidence, and proximity. The proximity says, if I'm going to find the key identifier, what's the proximity window where I'm going to look for additional content to make the rule be higher confidence? And if you look, there's actually two patterns defined within this rule, pattern 1 and pattern 2. Pattern 1 has a confidence of 85, and what it says is first it's going to look for a function called Social Security number, and that's a function we have in our classification engine that you can use in your custom written rules, or you could reference here, let's say, a regex that you create yourself. The next thing we say, for this to also match, now that you found the credit card, the Social Security number, within the proximity window, we need to find one of the matches of the next 4 things: keyword Social Security, keyword SSN additions, US date, or US address. And those are just defined lower in the file. In addition to that, I also have to find 0 matches, which means it's like an exclusion. This text can't be within the proximity of keywords SSN exclusions. And if all those things are satisfied, then I'm going to assign a confidence level of 85 to this detection. Below this, I have another pattern with a confidence of 65, which uses a different function for unstructured Social Security number. It also looks for keyword Social Security numbers and has to find one of function US date, address, or additions. And then you can see here I've added a couple of the keywords definitions, which is more like a dictionary, where we're looking for a word from a set of these. Here's SSN additions and SSN exclusions. So this just gives you a sample of how flexible the actual classification engine is and the kind of flexibility you have to configure and create your own custom patterns you want to be able to look for as part of the detections. This is really not just a regex engine, it's a full regex engine with a bunch of heuristics built around it that you get to fully control. Any questions? How do you export the XML? So for configuring of our classification rule packs, you would actually use PowerShell. And you can use that remote PowerShell for the service or remote PowerShell or just PowerShell on-prem. And I should also mention that all the capabilities you saw from an administrative perspective are scriptable. That's all PowerShell. All of our UI actually sits on top of commandlets, so everything you can do in the UI is fully scriptable. All right, any other questions? All right, so I think we're going to move on. There's a couple more slides. I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time. This is just looking at the incident reports we reviewed earlier, just to highlight that there's audit information, there's classification data, which again shows you the confidence that has been detected. And this is especially interesting where you have a richer data set where you're detecting, let's say, entities that have different confidence. Next we have is rule data of what was actually hit, what was the policy was applicable to, what were the actions taken, and finally, what is the actual credit card number value matched. And on the bottom, non-highlighted, is some context around that. The interesting thing is, because specifically the credit card information, what was matched and the context is sensitive, we don't actually put this into our logs, and we only include this in this incident reports. So all of our previous reports could report on all data, but we don't put the actual matched credit cards inside of that content. All right, again, quickly looking at DLP reporting and auditing. There's both a summary view of the various reports. There's 6 reports out of the box that show you inbound and outbound based on other policies or rules. And then we have the Excel workbook that allows you to drill into specific line items of detections that have been hit. And the nice thing about the Excel workbook, it provides you the data mining capabilities for you to find exactly what you're looking for. The next thing is to quickly look at built-in DLP content areas. So we've kind of touched on this throughout. Sorry, because I expected to see a different slide. This is fine. So these are the different content areas. And how we found the content areas is we actually looked at the various regulations around the world and seeing what are the entities supporting those regulations. And if those were global in nature, we added those to our definitions. And there's really 3 main buckets. There's PII, financial, and health information. And you can see the health information is a little bit more sparse. And the reason for that is things like HIPAA, while they define 17 or so entities, many of those entities are very custom. Of what is a patient ID record, that's a very different meaning in different healthcare providers. So that's where things for HIPAA, while we have a number of the global identifiers present, there's also customizations that need to happen for you to provide a richer or more complete implementation, and that's where we rely on our partners and ISVs to fill in the gap, or for the organizations themselves to custom write these. One of the things that I'm really looking forward to, and we're looking for your feedback on, is on the content areas we have provided out of the box, do you see things here that are global in nature, that are not available, and you want us to add those in? That's something that we're definitely interested in feedback as we continue to extend our content of things we're detecting. So we briefly talked about our extensibility points at various points in the session. There's really 3 main items here. One is around the DLP content, and that focuses on either the policies or the classification rules. And when you talk about classification rules or sensitive content, in that specific item, there's really an array or a range of customizations you can do. You can go by providing additional corroborative evidences, such as keywords or exclusions, And you can do that to both custom content and ones that's out of the box. And then the second one is really around providing full entities that are required to support your business needs. So defining employee IDs, health card, health employee or health patient IDs, etc. Those kinds of things, again, is fully extensible. The next one is around incident report integration, and you can use that for integrate with incident reporting systems that can kick off richer workflows and provide real-time notification of events occurring in the system. And finally, extensibility around our reporting solutions. All the content that you see in our reports is written actually into message tracking logs. And that's documented on TechNet, and you can use that to create your custom reports and integrate with custom reporting solutions. And actually, we have already one of our partners, Dell, previously Quest, who has integrated our content around DOP reports and the kind of DOP data we put into message tracking log to provide in their product message stats, business insights, built-in 6 DOP reports out of the box. So in the next version of message stats that comes out, I believe sometime over the summer, you will have out-of-the-box DOP reports available that leverage the content that we populate within the system and within message tracking logs. And this really kind of complements what we have done in the service, provide an on-prem offering only and extending the reach of the message stats to include DOP capabilities. In their product, you can also customize their reports as well beyond just the 6 that they have provided. So we're very excited to have that be available. So kind of just reaching the end, looking at a summary. Hopefully you got a good sense of the capabilities we are offering. Really, there's a strong focus on educational experience in Outlook 2013. Being available, the functionality you saw is both available for on-prem and also in Exchange in the service, Office 365. We've invested beyond just providing you a set of tools, but also providing you deep content. And that's, again, one of the key areas for us to provide you as much of a turnkey solution as possible to get you started in finding the right sensitive content within your communications. We've added extensibility in a number of layers to make sure that you can bring our solution further and ensure that you can capture custom content as part of the detections. And our integration with Exchange Admin Center provides a seamless management of our content within Exchange 2013. And finally, there's the reporting capabilities that we looked at from both ourselves and some of the things our partners are building that provide you rich analysis for both tuning purposes and also auditing capabilities. So that's kind of the end of my session. In the deck, I've included a number of resources to get you guys started if you want to look at things a little bit deeper and additional content. Anyway, any additional questions? I have a few more minutes to take questions as you guys like. And this is in your deck that's available on the site. Question up top?
Do you know if there is any direction to add this to Link, this type of protection for federated services and things like that?
So today our capabilities focused on the mail flows, and our capabilities exist in Exchange and the mail pipeline. So it sounds like Link would be something that you'd be most interested in. I'd love to talk to you about kind of scenarios you see top of mind in that area. If you want to kind of step back and step down here and have a conversation after.
Okay.
What's Microsoft's plan for updating these templates? Will they come out with cumulative updates, or are they going to be more frequent?
So the templates are actually quite flexible because these are things that can be provided outside of code. It's really admin data. We can actually just publish those on Download Center, and through one set of commandlets, you can push those into your deployments. So as we discover either tune our templates or add new content, we plan to make those available in the service. Obviously, we have better control of how we can push these out. But in terms of on-prem, we would actually push those through potentially Download Center because they're not part of code. So we have quite a bit of flexibility.
So will those updates then be in the RSS feed so we know they're available?
So we would roll them into updates as well as we find new content, but we even have a more rapid ability to update them, just purely posting them with a download center and providing a one-line script of how to import them into the system.
Sure, I'm just looking for notification of when they're available.
So the templates are all the ones I showed are already available now. We're researching another set right now, but don't have a timeline when that would be available for content. If you have specific ones you're interested that are not in here, I'd love to hear from you as well.
One quick piece of feedback for you that I didn't see on the slide where you had all the different regulations that you're looking for.
Yep.
The Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, FERPA. You have a lot of educational customers, and I'm one of them. You need to look for grades and things that would identify a student and would be private for a student. If a faculty member sends out grades along with Social Security numbers and things like that, it can get very ugly.
So we looked at that regulation. The problem with things like student IDs is they're not really very transferable between educations. So things like Social Security numbers and are very much available in the product, and you can easily build your own policy for those. Mm-hmm. For something like a student ID, that will have to be a custom entity added to the system to kind of fill out that policy.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, did you say that there was some OCR capabilities in the product already?
I'm sorry?
OCR capabilities. Did you say there was some in the product already?
Sorry, I'm just having a hard time. There's a feedback.
OCR capabilities.
OCR capability. There isn't capabilities there today, but because we use and can extend through iFilter capabilities, there is iFilters from third parties that do OCR that you can then tie into the text extraction that we leverage as well.
Okay. And the other question I've got, I realize you said this was for accidental release of information, but if we come across things that we can't scan inside of, like an encrypted zip or a password-protected Office document, is there a way to detect those and stop them?
There is. So we have specific predicates and transport rules that will identify other content we haven't been able to scan, and we have a specific thing for password-protected zip files because a lot of our customers see those as different than things we couldn't scan. And then you can provide any action you want as part of it. Obviously, we won't know what's in it, but you may then, for example, set up a moderation action which will allow somebody to review it before that's sent. So capability does exist in terms of the predicates you get to configure in transport rules to go after exactly the scenarios you're talking about. I should also actually add that in transport rules, we have added a new setting that allows you to control how severe of let's assume you had an error processing the file. You get to decide, is this processing something that's business critical, or would I rather do best effort? So you can decide if I'm going to defer messages that encountered errors for processing, or is that something that I'm going to just be able to push through and report an error instead? Yes, it will. So the question is, will it scan inside of regular zips? And yes, it will scan inside of regular zips, no problem. And we'll look inside of all the files that we have listed. One of the links here is actually around supported file types because this comes up quite often.
Are these rules applied sequentially? Is there some type of escape from one rule from leaving the others not applied?
So good question. So how are these rules applied? So transport rules are evaluated sequentially. However, you have some control over how that's done. If you want to have relationships between rules, you can actually set a header. Another rule can read that header, kind of communicating between the rules. You can also have actions such as will basically, once this rule is hit, it can now stop processing the rest of the rules. So you have, normally they're processed sequentially, but you also have control to alter that processing as you wish.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much.